Hi, I'm Kate, a 27-year-old marketing professional. I've always dreamed of my perfect wedding since I was a little girl. But everything changed one day, the day my whole world turned upside down. Growing up, I was the responsible one in the family. My younger sister, Emma, was the golden child, the center of our parents' universe. It never really bothered me because we each had our roles to play, and I was fine with mine. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that shattered my heart. It all started on a sunny afternoon. I remember walking into my parents' house, excited to finalize the last few details for my upcoming wedding. As soon as I stepped inside, a strange smell hit me, a mix of fresh paint and sawdust. Confused, I wandered into the kitchen. The kitchen, which had been old and outdated just a few weeks ago, now looked completely different. It was sparkling, modern, and looked like something from a home renovation show. "Mom? Dad? What's all this?" I asked, my voice echoing off the shiny new tiles. My mom turned to me with a big smile. "Oh, sweetie, isn't it amazing? We decided it was time Emma had a kitchen fit for a chef. You know how cramped the old one was." Emma chimed in, her voice full of excitement. "Yeah, Kate, check this out. There's so much space now. It's incredible." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. I didn't want to ask the question on my mind, but before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. "Where did the money for this come from?" The room went quiet. My dad looked away awkwardly, clearing his throat. My mom's cheerful tone turned stiff as she replied, "Well, since Emma needed it more, we used your wedding fund." I froze, my heart sinking. "My wedding fund? The money you've been saving for me since I was born." My voice trembled as tears welled up in my eyes. My mom nodded, trying to justify it. "Kate, it made sense. Emma's kitchen was so outdated, and this was important for her. We thought we'd help her out." "You used it without even asking me?" I interrupted, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Emma's face fell. "Kate, I didn't know. I thought they had extra money. I didn't think it would come from your wedding fund." Her words didn't matter. The damage was already done. I turned to my parents, looking for some sign of remorse, but all I saw was justification in their eyes. I couldn't hold back anymore. "I see where your priorities are," I said, my voice cold and distant. "Consider yourselves uninvited to the wedding." "Kate, wait," my mom pleaded, stepping toward me. "No," I snapped, sharper than I intended. "If my dreams mean this little to you, then I don't want you there. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Without waiting for another word, I turned and walked out of the house. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if my heart was breaking a little more with every move. By the time I got to my car, tears were streaming down my face. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. I had been planning my wedding for months, and now the people I thought would support me the most had crushed that dream without a second thought. I drove home, trying to process what had just happened. Memories of all the times I had been the responsible one flashed through my mind. I had always done everything I could to make my parents proud. I worked hard, saved money, and never caused trouble. Meanwhile, Emma, the golden child, always seemed to get everything handed to her. This time, though, it was too much. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal. They had taken something that was meant for me, something I had dreamed about my entire life, and given it away without even considering how it would affect me. As I sat alone in my apartment that evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the kitchen or the wedding fund. It was about how I had always been treated as second best. For years, I had accepted it, thinking that was just the way things were. But now, I saw things clearly. This was my time to stand up for myself, to put my own happiness first for once. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had to move forward without their support. In the end, the wedding would still happen, and it would still be beautiful. The people who truly cared about me would be there to celebrate, and that was all that mattered. This betrayal hurt more than I could put into words, but it also gave me strength. It taught me to value myself and my dreams, even when others didn't. And for that, I would forever be grateful. I reached my car, and tears rolled down my face like an unstoppable river. But with those tears came something else, a new determination. It was as solid and unshakable as the fancy granite countertops that had replaced my lifelong dream of a perfect wedding. My wedding would still happen, but it would be on my terms, smaller, simpler, and entirely mine. As for my family, they had made their choice, and now I was making mine. From this moment on, I would focus on building a life where I came first. The one day that was supposed to be all about me would truly reflect what I wanted. After canceling my parents' invitations, I thought the worst of the drama might be over. I was wrong. Adjusting my wedding plans felt bittersweet, but soon, rumors began to spread. I could only guess that my parents were proudly showing off Emma's shiny new kitchen to anyone who would listen. One afternoon, as I sipped coffee with my best friend, Sabrina, she leaned forward, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Kate, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Your parents actually said Emma's kitchen was a better investment than a wedding." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So, apparently, my biggest milestone in life is less important than a fancy kitchen remodel, I said, sarcasm dripping from my words. Sabrina stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "I mean, really? A kitchen is more important than your wedding? That's just ridiculous." Her reaction mirrored my own feelings. I thought I had already felt the worst of their betrayal, but somehow, hearing those words made it hurt even more. I clenched my hands around my coffee mug, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "They just don't get it," I said, my voice tight with anger. "But if they think they can brush this off without consequences, they're wrong. Cutting them out of my wedding isn't enough anymore." Sabrina nodded, her expression serious. "Good. They need to realize what they've done. This isn't just about a kitchen, it's about how they've treated you."
I knew she was right.
They needed to understand the impact of their actions, and for that, I needed support from someone who truly understood what I was going through. That's when I decided to reach out to my Uncle Tony. Tony had distanced himself from the family years ago, frustrated with their shallow values and favoritism. Reconnecting with him felt like finding a lifeline. "You know, Kate," he said one evening as we sat in his warm, book-filled study, "I always knew your parents favored Emma. But this is on a whole other level." His voice was rough with disapproval, and I could see the frustration in his eyes as he spoke. "Yeah," I replied, my own anger boiling over. "And now they're parading it around town like it's something to be proud of." Tony shook his head, his jaw tight. "They've made their priorities clear, Kate. Now it's your turn to do the same." His words struck a chord in me. I wasn't just planning a wedding anymore. I was taking control of my life. This wasn't just about one day. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let their actions define me. And for the first time, I felt strong enough to do it. I couldn't let this go. The hurt and anger were too strong. As I sat with Uncle Tony, I voiced my frustration, unsure of how to move forward. Tony leaned in, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "What if we don't let it go?" he said. "What if we let everyone see them for who they really are?" His idea was simple yet brilliant, a family reunion. It had been years since we'd had one, and Tony offered to host it at his place. The goal? To expose my parents' actions in front of the whole family. Planning the reunion gave me a sense of purpose. It was something to focus on besides my scaled-down wedding. Tony and I worked together, going through guest lists and contacting relatives we hadn't seen in years. The invitations hinted at a big surprise, sparking curiosity. When the day of the reunion arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. Tony's large backyard was buzzing with chatter as relatives greeted each other and caught up. I watched as my parents arrived, looking both confused and cautiously pleased by the attention. Once everyone had settled in, Tony clinked his glass, calling for silence. The murmur of conversations faded, and all eyes turned to him. "Family," he began, his voice commanding and steady, "we're here today to celebrate truth and transparency among us." I noticed my parents exchanging uneasy glances. They could sense that something was off. Tony continued, his tone growing more serious. "And what better way to celebrate truth than by clearing up some misconceptions?" He turned to me and gave a small nod. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. Many of you have probably heard about or even seen my sister Emma's beautiful new kitchen, I began, trying to steady my voice. What you might not know is how it was paid for. Whispers rippled through the crowd as I pulled out copies of bank statements and contractor bills. These documents show exactly where the money came from, I said, holding them up for everyone to see. The money set aside for my wedding, money saved for me since I was a child, was used without my permission to fund that kitchen remodel. A shocked silence fell over the crowd, broken only by murmurs of disbelief. My parents' faces turned a deep shade of red. Emma stared at her feet, clearly mortified. I continued, my voice shaking with emotion. My dream, my wedding, was deemed less important than a set of fancy appliances and granite countertops. Tony stepped forward then, his voice firm and commanding. We stand for fairness and support in this family. Today, we've seen an example of the opposite. Let's reflect on what this means for us as a family moving forward. The crowd buzzed with shock and indignation. Why would they do such a thing? An aunt called out, disbelief heavy in her tone. I answered, my words bitter but honest. In their eyes, it was about necessity, what they thought was more important. But in doing so, they overlooked fairness and respect for me. Emma, her face bright red with embarrassment, suddenly stood up. Kate, I didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. I had no idea the money came from your wedding fund. If I had known, I would never have let this happen. Her apology felt sincere, but it didn't erase the damage. I appreciated her words, but the betrayal wasn't just about her. It was about my parents and their decision to disregard my dreams without a second thought. As the reunion ended, the family's attitude toward my parents shifted. Their actions were now out in the open, and the truth couldn't be ignored. It wasn't the way I wanted things to unfold, but it gave me closure. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could move forward, stronger and more determined than ever to prioritize my happiness and the life I wanted to build. I didn't know, Kate. I swear I didn't know they used your money, Emma said, her voice shaky, her eyes wide with guilt. It's not just about the money, Emma, I replied, unable to hide my frustration. It's about trust. It's about respect. Our intention was never to hurt anyone, Dad said defensively, stepping in. Emma needed help, and we made a tough call. A tough call. I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. What about my wedding? What about my dreams? The air grew tense as relatives shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the tension between us. Seems to me, an older cousin spoke up cautiously. You thought only of one daughter. What about Kate? Another relative chimed in, their tone sharper. How do you justify choosing between your children like that? The room erupted into a heated argument. Voices overlapped, family members taking sides. Some expressed sympathy toward me, while others tried to justify my parents' actions. It was a chaotic mix of emotions. Enough. Tony's voice cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent, his commanding presence demanding attention. This isn't just a family squabble over money, he said, his voice steady and firm. It's about priorities. Today, we've seen clearly where those priorities lie. For some of us, the crowd grew quiet, the tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. My parents, usually so confident, now looked small under the weight of the disapproving stares directed at them. The reunion, which had started as a cheerful family gathering, had turned somber and uncomfortable. Slowly, relatives began to leave, offering me sympathetic glances and brief words of support. I'm sorry, Kate, Emma muttered as she walked past me, unable to meet my eyes. Don't be, I said softly. It's not your fault. But it's clear now, I need to step away from them. The drive home was quiet. My earlier resolve to expose the truth now mixed with a deep sadness. It wasn't easy to face the reality of my parents' choices, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and with it came a chance to move forward. Not just with my wedding plans, but with my life. In the days following the reunion, the fallout was immediate. Whispers of betrayal spread quickly through the community. My parents, who had always been respected, now faced harsh judgment from neighbors and friends. Walking through town, I felt the weight of the community's whispers. At the grocery store, I overheard snippets of conversations. "Did you hear about the Johnsons?" Someone whispered. "They took money from their daughter's wedding fund for a kitchen remodel." "Yeah," another voice replied. "And at the expense of their other daughter." Poor Kate. The judgment from others was a strange kind of comfort. Not joy, but validation that I wasn't overreacting. People saw what had happened for what it was, a betrayal. The looks my parents received in public were a stark contrast to the admiration they were used to. They couldn't ignore the consequences of their actions anymore, and it was clear they felt the weight of the community's disapproval. Despite everything, I felt a small sense of peace. The truth was no longer hidden, and I no longer had to carry the burden alone. My wedding would go on, smaller and simpler, but it would be a celebration of the people who truly cared for me. This painful experience taught me something important. I deserved to be surrounded by people who valued me and my happiness. It hurt to step away from my parents, but I realized that sometimes creating boundaries is the only way to protect yourself. With each passing day, I felt a little stronger. I had faced the betrayal, exposed the truth, and stood up for myself. It wasn't the wedding I had once dreamed of, but it was still my day, and it was still mine to cherish. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about a kitchen or a wedding fund. It was about respect, love, and fairness, things I had a right to demand in my life. And from that point on, I vowed to never settle for less. Validation came slowly, but it arrived nonetheless. It felt good to know that the pain I had endured was seen, even if only by strangers. People now understood what I had gone through, and that recognition made me feel less alone. One chilly Thursday morning, as I browsed the local market, I spotted Emma. She approached me hesitantly, a wicker basket dangling awkwardly from her arm. Her nervousness was clear, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Kate," she began softly. "Save it, Emma," I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not in the mood." She paused, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her tone sincere. "I really didn't know." I shook my head, my emotions carefully guarded. "Whether you knew or not doesn't change what happened," I said flatly. "They chose you, Emma. They always choose you. And somehow I'm always the one paying the price." Her expression crumbled, hurt filling her eyes. In the past, I might have softened at that look, but not this time. I couldn't let myself go back to that place. "I need space, Emma," I said, my voice unwavering. "Space to heal and rebuild my life without the chaos our parents bring." She nodded slowly, taking a small step back. "I understand," she said quietly. "But if you ever need me, just know I'm here." I watched her walk away, her shoulders slumped as though she were carrying the weight I had carried for so long. For the first time, though, I felt lighter, stronger. The months that followed brought whispers of my parents' misfortunes. Their once thriving boutique, a cornerstone of their social standing, was struggling. Regular customers who had once admired their charm now saw them in a different light. "The Johnsons? No, thank you," I overheard one woman say at a coffee shop. "You can't trust them, not after what they did to their own daughter." Their reputation crumbled, and with it, their financial stability. Rumors of bankruptcy surfaced, a sharp contrast to the life of comfort and privilege they had always enjoyed. While their worlds seemed to fall apart, mine was finally coming together. My wedding day arrived, not with the grandeur I had once imagined, but with something far better, a heartfelt celebration filled with love. The venue was small and intimate, decorated with simple elegance. Close friends and a few family members who had stood by me filled the space. Every moment felt like a stitch mending the fabric of my self-worth. "Congratulations, Kate," Uncle Tony toasted, raising his glass with a proud smile. "Here's to new beginnings and true happiness." The reception was filled with laughter and dancing. The soft glow of fairy lights and the scent of jasmine filled the air, creating a magical atmosphere. It wasn't perfect because it was extravagant. It was perfect because it was real. As my personal life flourished, so did my career. Promotions came my way, opening doors to new opportunities. I was invited to speak at marketing panels, where I shared my experiences and inspired others facing their own challenges. The toxic chaos that had once defined my life was gone. In its place was a newfound sense of control, choice, and peace. Looking back, I realized that losing my parents' support had been painful, but it also gave me the freedom to grow into my best self. My life was no longer about meeting others' expectations. It was about living on my terms. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when the sadness crept in. But with every step forward, I felt stronger and more confident. My wedding, my career, and my happiness were all proof that I could build a life that was mine, free from the shadows of favoritism and silent resentment. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. My story wasn't about a wedding fund or a fancy kitchen. It was about finding my voice, reclaiming my dreams, and choosing a life where I came first. That was a gift I would never take for granted. I built a life surrounded by people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. One quiet evening, I sat on my balcony, feeling the cool breeze play with the wind chimes. I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal I experienced was a harsh lesson, but it taught me something priceless: my own worth and resilience. As I looked up at the stars, I realized that the hardest challenges in life often create the strongest people. My parents' decisions may have triggered everything, but it was my own choices that shaped the ending. In that moment of peace, I knew I had made the right choices for myself. This is Kate's story of betrayal, growth, and finding happiness. What do you think of her decision to distance herself from her family? Do you think it was the right choice, or could it have been handled differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales like this one. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.